believe we will be live any moment now. Hello, we are live, and today I have the rather charming David from Four Corners of the Page. Some of you came with me when I went and visited his channel and talked about Dungeon Crawler Carl. During that live stream, we discovered that David is reading my favourite series, The Realm of the Elderlings. And I have him frozen on my stream, so I'm hoping that that's not the case for too much longer. And he will be talking to us about his experience having not long ago finished Tawny Man. His details are in the description if you want to go and check out his channel. He recently had a fabulously long conversation with Stephen Erickson, the author of the Malazan series. And apparently that went really well. So do feel free to go and visit him there and watch that. And it looks like he's just going to reboot his stream. This is quite awkward, really, because we were having a wonderful chat before we went live. And that was probably a good 10 minutes of chatting away. Oh. Here we go. Let's try again. Here we go. Here's David.
Do you know what happened?
I don't know. I don't know. You froze on my link.
Yes, so here's what happened. It was totally my fault. I'm an idiot, and I'm an idiot not because I did it, but because this is the second time I've done it. In my efforts to be a wonderful guest on your channel, I put my phone on no notifications, and just by pure instinct, hit airplane mode.
Of course, as you do.
And it's the second time. Well, listen, I don't want any notifications. I don't want to get distracted, but I'm also hotspotting myself. So
well, there you go. That's fine. I'm just letting people know that you recently spoke with Stephen Erickson, if they wanted to go and see that, and that we'd obviously previously spoken about Dungeon Crawler Carl. But
absolutely,
now we're here doing my favourite, Robin Hobb. And so I'm going to start with the beginning. When did you start your journey into the realm of the Elderlings? When did you pick up Assassin's Apprentice?
Right. So forgive me for framing it this way, because I maybe this isn't the best way to say this, but I don't think I'm alone, actually. So no, I will say it. I had the wrong perception of Robin Hobb, because
a lot of people do.
I've seen her stuff on a shelf, on bookshelves everywhere for years and years and years. So I started reading fantasy properly maybe 2011, 2012, something like that. And I had a good friend, Kirsten, who said to me, listen, you might really like Robin Hobb. And in my mind, I always viewed Hobb, and I don't know where this came from. Maybe it was just some misogyny in my teenage years, or maybe it was that I kind of twinned her with like something like The Wheel of Time, which I do believe falls under this umbrella, of just being a bit nothingy, long, bloated.
Old-fashioned.
Yes. And also I wonder if that's kind of exacerbated by the covers, which all look very samey all the way down. And I actually really like the covers now. But I had the wrong perception of Hobb for about 10 years, or not that long, but 3 or 4 years. And especially because when I was 19, 20, when I first kind of encountered Hobb's name, I was reading a lot of grimdark. And I was basically just being a pretentious idiot, to be honest. I'm like, I like my stuff dark and grim and bloody and nihilistic and existentialist, and basically just being foolish. And I think I viewed Hobb as a bit more light and fluffy in comparison. So as an idiot teenager, I just kind of disregarded her, put her in a corner, having never even approached a single word that she'd written. And it was only after kind of beginning to watch BookTube about 5 years ago, her name kept coming up. And eventually people kept talking about the character and the level of prose. And I thought, you know what? I think I have mischaracterized this writer, having not read a single page she's written. So about 3 or 4 years ago, she's been on my TBR. 2 years ago, I had a copy of Assassin's Apprentice, the really flimsy 300-page version that's small and squat and has really, forgive me, terrible art design. It's got that really kind of almost,
it looks like Paul Rudd.
Turquoise sky, boy in front of a castle. It's very 80s looking.
Yeah, I haven't got it, but I know exactly the one, and he looks like a young Paul Rudd. I do know that. David Whelan did that cover.
Paul Rudd looks like a young Paul Rudd. Anyway, I was moving to Kuwait, where I'm at now, and I was trying to jettison a lot of books. So I was just trying to read as many physical copies as I possibly could. So I saw Assassin's Apprentice. It was on the top of the pile. I thought, let's give it a go tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hobb's super light and fluffy, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, she's luxurious, I would say. Her writing is luxurious.
Lovely word. Yes.
Yeah, but I, again, totally wrong perception. I picked up Assassin's Apprentice, thought, right, let's just get this one out before I move. Read Assassin's Apprentice, finished it, had about 100 books still in this physical stack, disregarded that stack, immediately went to Waterstones in the UK, which is the equivalent of Barnes & Noble, picked up Royal Assassin, picked up Assassin's Quest, and just kept reading Hobb. I then took a break between the first and second trilogy, about 6 months, read that second trilogy, took another break for about 4 or 5 months, and just finished Tawny Man. So my journey with Hobb has been actually reading Hobb and not just judging her from a distance. It's been about 2 years.
That's pretty ideal, to be fair.
Yeah. And I've had a wonderful time, and I think slow burning Hobb is the best way of doing it. I think reading these in one big gulp would be not wrong, but
it can be very satisfying.
Yes.
But it also can be a lot, because they're, as Chardia so wonderfully put it, they're super light and fluffy. Not.
Yes.
You know, you were saying that you didn't think of it as grimdark or anything like that, and a friend of the channel, a very lovely chap, Alan, who runs the Library of Alexandria channel. He hasn't read Hobb. I still haven't convinced him to pick it up. But everything he's heard, he calls it grim hope. And I was like, actually, that's not a bad way to describe Robin Hobb.
Yes.
It's not grim dark, it's grim hope.
Yes.
Because it can be quite grim. But that's okay. I'm glad you found the series and did pick it up and allowed Robin Hobb to convince you with her own words. And I'm glad that you did it in those little chunks.
So here's how I would frame my enjoyment of Robin Hobb, which is that, now this wasn't this was before I made a booktube, but just because I was feeling like I wanted to do one, I made my top 10 series of all time. And my only stipulation in having those series is that the series had to be completed when I posted them.
Yes.
And I disregarded that rule for Robin Hobb. And I forget where I put her at this point. I'd only read the first trilogy, but she was the only author who I had not read her bibliography and still made that list, which I think speaks volumes about how good she is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad you've made it, Shana. And Zachary's here as well. Lovely to see you. We mentioned you before I went live. I noticed that you've just subbed. Welcome. There's lots of Hobb content on my channel.
Shay, I'm going to say good things about Shay because he can't fight back. Shay's wonderful. He started the same time as me. His videos are far better than mine. Absolutely worth following Shay. He's doing great stuff. Yeah,
I'm glad. I'll be pleased to bump into him, I'm sure, in the very near future. But in this instance, we're following your journey, and you know, you've picked up Assassin's Apprentice, and you're like, okay, I now have to inhale everything this woman's written. Clearly. So when you got through quite a lot of readers, particularly, and forgive me for generalizing, but a lot of younger readers find it very hard work. It's slow. There's not a lot of action or the same kind of intensity in pace as you often get with modern fantasy. And that, I have found, tends to be a problem with younger readers. Was that something that you encountered, or were you okay with just dawdling through the story? Was that an issue for you, do you think? Or
I have an issue with action for action's sake. It really is a bit of a red flag for me in a work if there's an action scene purely because the author feels like we need some combat at this point. I recently did my last video on my channel I posted today was just a Brandon Sanderson tier list, and I really like Brandon Sanderson. I feel like I slight him more than I praise him, but the truth is I really like him. But he has this issue sometimes. I feel like he gets 100 pages in and think he needs something exciting to happen, and I think that is an error to make, because if your characters are good enough and the plot is married to the characters, then you do not need tension to be actual physical violence. Yeah. And Hobb understands that completely. So it wasn't an issue for me at all.
Oh, I'm pleased to hear that. Very pleased to hear that. And then, of course, obviously, we get Fitz's first major arc, as it were, as he goes on his big adventure with Verity or rather with Kettrick and Kettle and Starling in the fall to go to Verity in the mountains. Yes. And that's the big adventure, the big quest, the very old-fashioned kind of quest where we take a while and we learn things about ourselves on the way.
Yep.
And then we shift to Liveships, which is multi-POV, and it is quite an intense story told over a very short period of time. How did you find that shift in storytelling?
Interesting.
Was that
first of all, can we pause? I want to hear your journey with Hobb. Can you give me the spark notes?
Me?
Yeah, I know everyone else knows it, but you haven't told me.
No, that's all right. Okay, very shortly, 2001, the John Howe covers had flirted with me from bookshelves around the place for a long time. BookTube wasn't a thing. I live in New Zealand. There isn't a huge book community that I was a part of. And I knew nothing about these books, but the cover just kept flirting with me. And I was like, and I did pretty much what you did. I read the first one and they were like, oh, okay, I need the next one. And then that was kind of me. At the time, I had to wait. Just trying to think. Golden Fool had just come out, and I had to wait about a year for Fool's Fate to come out. So when I first picked up the books, Tawny Man was just being finished. And I pretty much at that point it got reread every year because I didn't have a huge library. I didn't have a big book collection. It was like, well, if I'm going to read something, I want to read something I like. And obviously there's the 9 books of Lovely. So I reread and I just kept rereading every year. And then the Rainwilds came out and I was like, oh, new books. Okay. And so as each book came out, I just added it to the annual reread. And so it's meant that I've read these books now well over 20 times. Well, at first 9 anyway.
Yeah.
And that's been kind of me. And until I found BookTube, which was, really only recently in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I didn't actually know that Fitz was depressed. It didn't even occur to me that he was depressed until suddenly everybody I was talking to on BookTube, because I found BookTube and found my people, I could talk books. Like he's just, he's depressed and he's doing the thing. I'm like, really?
Yes.
And then the next read through, I was like, oh my God, he is. I haven't noticed because I'm depressed. I suffer with depression. So everything he does feels normal to me. Like, of course people think like this because this is how I think.
Yes.
It really opened my eyes. And from that point was the benefit of finding my people. To get other lenses on this story has been the biggest blessing I have ever had. And so it's why I love when new readers find it. I'm like, oh, give me this new lens. Give me another way to see these characters.
Yes.
I've found some really meaningful insights from other readers.
Is the cover you're talking about the cover behind you? Or they're all behind you?
Well, they are all behind me. It's this series. I don't have the first one anymore. It fell off my shelf and fell apart. But it's these series, this artist's series of covers.
Yes.
So it's very landscapey. It's very moody. It's very atmospheric.
Yep.
And almost all of my favorite art from the series is by John Howe. Although the artist who does the artwork for the illustrated editions, Magali Villeneuve, I think is how I would say it. She's French. Her art is magnificent. It really is.
Yeah. I am.
So that's my journey with Hobb.
I was going to say, it seems like the perfect series. First of all, sorry for derailing you about 8 minutes in.
That's fine.
But I can't think of a better series to read year on, year out while you're waiting for the next release. I mean, that just seems perfect to me because it's such a layered story. And the layering comes from the characters. So as you said, being able to pick up these nuances and do that in a community just seems perfect. I'm doing the same thing with Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is also fabulous, but gives you a very different experience. Yeah.
It is, but also it's the same kind of thing in that if all you want to do is just read a story, then that's fine. You can just read a story. Yes. If you're like me, and I know that like yourself, and you want to read a story and then think about it, and then just let it percolate.
Yes.
It lets you do that because there is subtext and there is a greater story being told at the same time. And it lets you, what's the word I want to use? Marinade in it.
Yes.
It allows you that. And that's one of the funnest part of reading for me.
I totally agree. You know, I finished Lonesome Dove. It was my Christmas read. I thought I'd read a Western for Christmas. And Lonesome Dove, if you haven't read it, it's fabulous.
No, I have read Lonesome.
Yeah. But I made the egregious mistake of finishing Lonesome Dove and the next day just moving on to my next book. And I kind of realized in retrospect how silly that was, because that book deserved a week's reflection that I didn't give it. So, yeah.
It's one of the reasons about, because I had a stroke quite a long time ago, and it made reading new things very difficult for me, just in having it stay in my brain. So I found that for me to read new things now, I have to go back to reread afterward, because my brain's like, we just took in a whole lot of new stuff and it's hard. So it's habit for me to, okay, I've read a new thing, read something I'm familiar with, so that I don't have to think about what I'm currently reading, and I can let what I've just read sort of sink in a bit more.
Yes.
Yes, hello. Welcome for joining the stream. And Shay here has said that Fitz and the Fool is the favourite, which is the final trilogy. But Liveships is up there as in contention. And that is what I have found to be the case. Most, I'm not going to say all because there are exceptions, most people rank Tawny Man, Liveships, and Fitz and the Fool interchangeably in their top three.
Okay.
Across the board.
Okay.
Then it's Farseer, then it's Rain Wilds.
And I disagree.
Where do you put the three you've read so far?
Tawny Man is top.
Yes.
Tawny Man is indisputably up at the top. I think what Hobb accomplishes as a standalone trilogy and as a sequel to the Farseer trilogy is incredible. And it's all based on the characters, which we'll get to in a minute. Second, I would put Farseer.
Okay.
I think part of the reason for that is I have a real strong affection for Assassin's Quest. I think Assassin's Quest is a wonderful novel that people seem to hate on a little bit in the community. Not hate on, but find to be a bit more lackluster comparatively.
It's the one that seems to be the most divisive.
Yes, and I thought it was wonderful. And I would put Liveships at the bottom so far. Which I don't know if that answers your previous question. I love Liveships. Yeah.
It's quite odd because in the last few months, I've had a surprising number of people say, okay, I've kind of bounced off Liveships a little bit. That's not what I wanted, and it wasn't what I was expecting. And other people have gone, this is just by miles and away better than Farseer. You know, why can't I just start here? Which breaks my brain. But it can very much be like many books, obviously. It's what you bring to it as a reader. And Liveships focuses so very much on trauma. It can just be a really difficult read for a lot of people. And the characters aren't overly likable, particularly at the start. And it can be hard work. If you're not ready for it, it can be a hard read. But there are people who just fall into it and like, yes, this exploration of themes and, all of this, mental health that goes into that series is a big conversation. So,
yes. But surely you could argue that all Hobb novels to some extent are dealing with mental health. Yeah.
Absolutely. The whole series is about trauma in one way or another.
Yeah.
And Liveships is just the most in your face with it.
Yes. Which maybe is part of the reason that I didn't gel with it. I mean, listen, it's all comparative, right? A bad Hobb book is still up here. And I wouldn't even call them a bad Hobb. I would call any of them bad Hobb books. But I think you're right that there's a slightly in-your-face issue with Liveships that slightly did disengage me. I think that you're right. The likability of the characters is, I think some of them are likable, but in general, there was no one in Liveships where I turned the page to a new chapter and thought, oh, goody, we're back with this person. Whereas with Fitz, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe Kenneth, who is reprehensible but is interesting to read about.
Oh, fascinating.
I mean, he's deplorable. He's a horrific human being, and you don't understand why until the very final few pages. But it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Hi, Samwise. But I think my biggest issue with Liveships is Ship of Destiny. I think how to articulate this. Hobb's writing is gorgeous and slow, and again that word luxurious.
Yes.
She doesn't feel the need to push the plot forward if that's not where the characters are. which I really do enjoy about her work. But something about Ship of Destiny, and I don't even know if I'm articulating this very well, because I'm about to say the same thing, but in an opposite, slightly critical way. I think there's a point with Ship of Destiny that the plot began to feel slightly turgid. I felt like that novel could have been tighter mechanically. And so there was about 200, 300 pages of Ship of Destiny where I thought, it's not that we don't need this, but I feel like we're languishing a little bit. And it's kind of ironic in a novel all about getting to a certain destination that I feel like we've paused. Yeah. And that, I found it a little bit too slow for my liking. And I don't know if this is heresy in the Hobb communities that I don't think much. But I think I found the not the climax, the last 200 pages were fabulous. But something about that, the middle part of that third book, I feel like I was beginning to look towards the end in a way I never have for a Hobb book before and never have since. Yeah.
I think for myself with live ships, because I get really invested in the exploration of trauma in live ships. I think it's just so exceptionally done. Yes. But I agree that in Ship of Destiny, once we've got all the pieces in place, and it feels like they're in place quite early in the book, it just takes an awful long time for them to get where they need to be to continue the story. So I don't disagree with you at all there. It gives us that time to luxuriate and to kind of, wallow almost in those characters, which is one of the things I do really like about live ships. A number of readers have said to me, I don't like nautical fantasy, which is such a strange thing because there's so much nautical fantasy that it's something you don't like.
Yes. I have a friend who says that too, yeah.
I don't get it. I really don't. I look at it and think, okay, this is somewhere where the ships are part of the story in a way that they're usually not. And they literally are part of the characters and part of the cast and driving the story. But they're also used in a wonderful way to create tension because you're trapped on these vessels. You can't escape. If you're having a problem with someone, you have to deal with it because you're in these closed confines and everything gets heightened the longer you're on ship. And I like that in driving those really intense character interactions. I think it's a really clever way to do it.
And also, while we're on live ships, I think something that Hobb does exceptionally in that series is we're full spoilers, right?
Oh yes, full spoilers.
Yeah, triple checking. The horror of what the live ships are is brilliantly done. And at the same time, what I love that trilogy does, and you can see the smile blossoming on my face as I talk about it, because it genuinely is incredibly and so difficult to pull off. What she does, she never gives you the reveal of what the live ships are at any single one moment in time. It is a slow reveal.
Yeah.
And it's never and by the way, let's have this horrific moment of discovery where we all together realize with horror what the live ships are. At least I don't remember there being one. It was more like readers gradually become aware of what is going on here. And some people might get it 500 pages before someone else, but that isn't them being sleuths and getting it earlier. Just the books allow you to pick up this moment of horror at your own time. And I don't think I've ever really encountered that, just speaking about it in a novel or series before.
No, she's really good at that.
Yeah.
Just kind of letting it unfold naturally for you to suddenly come to a realization for yourself that, oh my God, that's what these are.
Yes.
This is what's being done to them. And as you say, the horror of it, and I've said this to someone else reasonably recently. She does a wonderful thing, Robin Hobb. And she doesn't hide anything. Nothing is a reveal. It's only as you suddenly realize that, that was a thing. Sometimes it can feel like a reveal. The Kennett reveal does feel quite revelatory when he suddenly states outright, this is who I am.
Yes.
And you're like, how did I not see it? Some people figure it out. Not a lot of people do. And yet everybody, by the time Kennett says, this is who I am, the luck is in my name, you realize that she hasn't hidden it from you. All of the facts have been there on page. You could have worked it out for yourself. Yes. It just never occurs to you to do that until he says it and you go, oh my God.
The curtain.
And suddenly all of those connections fall into place and you're like, oh, it wasn't being hidden from us as readers.
Exactly.
It wasn't a deliberate attempt to sort of drive us away from the truth so that it could be a shock later.
Yes.
No, the reread happens and you're like, oh my, this was right in my face from the first time we meet him.
Yes.
And that is a subtlety that not a lot of authors can pull off, I don't think.
It's really tough. And you know what, like you just said at the start, Fitz is depressed.
Yeah.
And that took you a while to kind of work out. But again, never hidden from you. It's the curtain is never drawn back, is what I was going to say a minute ago. The curtain is never drawn back. The curtain is always open.
Yeah.
It's an incredible skill. It's magnificent. And I'm struggling to think of another author who does something comparable. I don't know if anyone watching now or later on can give me a similar author, because I really do struggle to think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And, you know, Shadia gets the best one, I think, for one that never really gets revealed. And it doesn't ever get revealed
Yes.
in Liveships that this is who Amber is. And in fact, I did spoil it for someone completely unintentionally, because for me, by the time you finished Liveships, you've worked out who Amber is. This person hadn't. And I spoiled the moment for them in Tawny Man, where Fitz is confronted with this knowledge that Lord Golden is also Amber, is also the fool.
Yes.
And I ruined that moment for her, which I feel so bad for still these many years later. But I assumed that it was so obvious by the end of the trilogy that of course you've worked it out. Since then, many people have said, I didn't work it out until later.
Yeah.
So it's a test, as you say, it's a testament to her writing that it is all there on page. And whether you make those connections or not, she's not hiding them from you.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of talent.
Yes, it's fully as well. Just going back to the thematic complexity of Liveships, I think this is something that, as well, that Hobb does really well. Is the reveals are intrinsically linked with the themes that have been there all along. So I'm thinking of the Liveships themselves and the moment of horror. I guess that these things are not these. I mean, they are these beautiful ships that can you can have a relationship with and can take you almost like a companion across the seas and that kind of romantic feeling. These are creatures that have not been allowed to come into their full potential. And maybe I mean, there's a case to be made whether they are the dragons themselves or whether they're just the echoes of the dragons. I know that the novel tries to make you think it's the second.
Ultimately, for me, it's one of the underlying themes. Again, she's really good with these thematic storylines where not only does she have a really strong theme around memory being self, like with no memory, you're nothing.
Yes.
But she also brings in this theme of the value of life. And she talks about it, but with the fall at the end of Farseer. And she talks about it all the way through Liveships. And that if once you own people, you have devalued everything.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you can't, that shouldn't be an economic thing. It shouldn't exist.
Yes.
And then we get this other underlying element of slavery where all unbeknowing, these families now own beings. It's not, they don't just own magical wood, they own sentient beings. So there's that element again of slavery, and however lovely the owner may be, and however that was not their intent, that is what's happening. These living beings are at the mercy of somebody else. So there's that, it's a theme just basically around the wrongness of owning an individual. What makes the individual, what is it that's abhorrent about it? It's gorgeously done.
And that's picked up in so many other ways in all the other trilogies. Just like one of the reasons that Golden Fool is probably my favorite novel of the 9 so far that I've read is that sense of ownership is explored in a totally different way. Characters trying to claim each other and claim each other's actions and agency, even though none of them are really enemies in that novel. Everyone is ostensibly mates. But at the same time, they can't help but try and one up each other and manipulate each other and twist each other to their own ends.
They've all got their own objective, and they're all being driven by some have their own drives and motivations. Others are working toward goals that aren't their own because their own goal has to have that person working with them. And there's a wonderful, I mean, there are moments in Tawny Man that still have the power to make me weep. And one of them is the reunion we get with Burrick, where he forces Fitz to step back, and he's like, think it through. You know, don't just keep listening to these people and doing what they tell you. Think it through. And I have skipped over the reunion because I will cry. But that presence back in his life of look at it with your own eyes is what wakes him up to the situation, that hang on. Yeah. If I do this, what are the long-term implications? And it's amazing.
Yeah. Hi, Ben.
No, this is not the Dungeon Crawler Carl chat, Ben. This is Robin Hobb. You've had yours. Hopefully I'll get to talk to you again soon when you reread.
But listen, Ben, we'll do what's the Dinnerman one? Kaiju. I'll read Kaiju, and then we can all chat about that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
We'll do something like that. Yeah.
But the long-term implications of everybody's actions is another one of those underlying themes. You know, yes. Fall is trying to convince Fitz from really early on in Farseer, things that you do have repercussions. And Fitz is like, but I'm not important. You know, no, I don't make history-changing things. And the Fool's like, everybody does.
Yeah.
And if you live your life with that in mind, things will get better.
Yes.
And
it's the butterfly effect from the present day, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
And really,
sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say that we see that throughout the series.
Yeah.
And the decisions that Fitz makes, particularly because he is the catalyst, the decisions he makes at those key moments in history very much change the direction that things are going to go in.
Yeah.
And they're usually the decisions he makes on his own, where he isn't being led by shade. He's not being led by Verity. He's not being led by anybody. It's in the moment. He's in the moment. He's emotional usually. Quite often he's angry. And he makes a decision that is often stupid, but comes from the heart. And those are the decisions that turn the story. And as the series progresses, and you'll see as you read further, all of those decisions lead toward everything that happens in the future. Which, again, it's the point of the whole thing, is that your decisions have repercussions. So think them through.
And you know what? I said, I remember, who did I say this to? Was it Von Roycroft? It might have been Von Roycroft. I'm acutely aware of this theme, and I love this theme as a teacher, because I'm constantly aware of, and I'll screw up every day, but I'm constantly aware, because we remember this when we were students ourselves, that something a teacher has said to us as a student, for better or worse, just stays in our long-term memory. Whether that's a teacher saying to you, listen, you're really good at this activity. I think you did brilliantly. That will stay with you. And if you have a teacher saying to you, listen, heart to heart, you need to improve on this, that will stay with you. And also when a teacher messes up and gets angry and says something that they shouldn't say, that stays with you. And we have all three in our brains, I guarantee you right now. And so pedagogically, for me as an educator, this theme is so central to me, because I have had students years ago come up to me, or years on, say to me, listen, when you said this to me, that made me go this way.
Yeah.
And I'm also recognizing that it can go the other way too. It's a real burden. It's empowering, but it's also a burden, the agency that we do have on how things are going to be in the future. Yeah.
And other people. And the fact that, and I keep coming back to Liveships, which is unusual. I don't usually focus on it quite so heavily, but there is very much a sense of setting an example in Liveships, where we have Ronica in particular when she's dealing with David, and she doesn't want to drop him as a friend, because that's just not the thing you do. Even though he has fallen from grace over the years, she refuses to drop him as a friend, because that's not who she wants to be. She doesn't want to be someone who drops friends, even though it's actually hurting her family to still have ties with this person.
Yes.
And the the whole economy in life ships is based around these new people coming in and changing the way they live, influencing younger people to change the way they live, and it undermines their economy and it causes all this disaster. So there's this sense of sometimes you have to be really aware of your own values and not go with the flow, because having slaves will work your farm cheaper. You'll get better profit on your goods. Great. You own people. This in order to make profit. This is not something we should be encouraging. But because everybody's doing it, how could it be wrong?
But also at the same time, this is what I was going to just jump in and say, is that Hobb, in the writing of those scenes, does make it's again very clever of her. And this is my least favorite trilogy so far, and I'm banging on about how good it is, which I think testifies to how much I'm enjoying Hobb. She does make you, and this is really scary, for a moment, step back and consider, listen, this family's going to go under, and there's so much riding on this family's success. Would it be so bad? And then you think, wait, what am I justifying slavery here for a minute?
Right.
Incredible talent, and the fact she kind of makes you see that vantage point. There's a horrific vantage point, and for a brief second, almost take a step before you go, hang on, no wait, it's not worth it, because you're so hanging on to the relationship.
But she also doesn't preach it. Like at no point does she go, I shouldn't do that. She just lays it out and goes, is this the right thing to do? Yeah. And you leave the trilogy, hopefully, as a reader going, yeah, that's not a good thing to do.
And there's also that thing in live ships. We're talking about how people are claiming ownership of other people. That also happens in the case of all the main characters, right? I think basically all the main characters are told what they should be doing from the get-go. And that is the spur for so much of the conflict. Is that I'm trying to think of a single main character who at the beginning is not in a position that they have forced into being to some extent.
No, all of them are in a position where they either haven't chosen that position and they're making the best of it, or they've had no choice but be in that position, or whatever it is. Nobody has decided, this is what I'm going to be, this is what I'm going to do, except Kennett. But Kennett is the outlier, and there are reasons, and he's written with such nuance. And I mean, you've read Tawny Man now, so I tend to skirt around Kennett, because unless people have read Tawny Man, you still don't really get a sense that he has been partially forged. So he's written in such a way where not only is he missing an entire part of his identity, he's been forged to the point where he's not capable of emotion. He's not capable of change. It's not that he doesn't want to. It's not that he doesn't see the need for it. I mean, he doesn't, but he literally can't. He doesn't have all of the pieces of himself to put back together. He's not a whole person. So there's, how much agency does he really have? Yes.
And it's a good metaphor, isn't it, for trauma, and how is there and this is also explored through Fitz himself in Tawny Man, is there an extent to which our trauma overwhelms us and we're unable to get out of that place? Yeah. And we get it with Fitz, basically, isn't it?
And it's that divorcing from a memory, that divorcing of self, which happens a lot with trauma. Again, I have my own history with trauma and depression and all sorts of things. And it resonates very strongly with me, because it's written very honestly, that sometimes it is just easier to go, I don't want to think about that. And in pushing that away, this is what therapy teaches you, is you have to find a way to live with it. You have to integrate it into yourself to move forward. So when we see Fitz at the end of Tawny Man regain the memories of his life as a teenager, when he's the most passionate and he's the most dramatically invested in his life, and you suddenly realize how flat he's been throughout. And
this is what I said to you in our chat offline. Exactly. You suddenly realize, because when he gets those memories back, suddenly it's like he comes to life. In much the same way as we've just watched the forged people come back to life as their memories are released. And he then has to deal with his trauma. He has to deal with the fact that his father figure
married the woman he loved. He has to
Yes.
deal with the fact that his mother gave him up. He has to deal with it. He can't just ignore it anymore. He actually has to take it into himself and heal.
And what does the fool say when he gives it back to him? It's something along the lines of, I couldn't take this for another second. And then he gives it to him as a gift.
It's too much.
Yeah.
It's too human.
Yeah.
And that's something too that I really liked with the dynamic between Fool and Fitz and Night Eyes, is that the three of them together formed this whole. And there have been some wonderful metaphors I've seen online where Fitz is always looking at the past, the Fool is always looking at the future, and Night Eyes is in the present. You know, together they have all of the elements. I like that. Yeah, and I'm like, I like it. Feels right.
Yes.
And by the end of Tawny Man, they are literally all merged, because Fitz has spent time being merged with Night Eyes at the end of Royal Assassin and the beginning of Assassin's Quest. They are one being in two bodies.
Yes.
And then you get a point in Tawny Man where now the Fitz entity that is also part Night Eyes is now merged with the Fool. And now they're in two bodies. So now we have these three life forces, if you like, are now all of them combined to some degree in both the Fool and in Fitz. And the Fool has no vision of what his life is like now.
Yes.
Because, for him, he was supposed to die. And Fitz changed it.
Yeah.
Which was an incredibly powerful moment. Because he's like, no. You've given me this power, which I have declined and refused and repudiated my whole life. But now you're dead, and no. I'm going to claim this power that you gave me, and I'm going to change it.
Yes.
And there's what's the word? There's an empowering feeling to it, where in claiming the fact that he has power, he can change the situation.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a teacher, that must be something that you see in young people when they suddenly realize, actually, I can do a thing, and I am going to now move forward knowing I am capable of doing what I want to do.
Yes.
So when you add that with his memories, suddenly Fitz as an adult.
Yes.
Instead of this emo kids that, I'm sorry, you're 35, get over it.
Yeah. I said to you, when I first finished Fitz in the Fool, when I finished Fool's Fate, the first thing I haven't read Fitz in the Fool. The first thing I did was I messaged you and I said this thing. First of all, question very quickly. Can you hear my daughter? Are we okay?
We're okay.
We're okay. Good. She's woken up next door, but my wife's with her, but I just thought I'd check if anyone can hear an infant. See this mug here? I bought this as a gift from my wife because that's exactly what my daughter looks like.
That's so good.
It's not customized, it just happens to look like her. Anyway, the first thing I did when I finished Tawny Man is I messaged you and I said, listen, have I been an idiot here? This idea of Fitz having been basically stunted and blunted the whole trilogy, have I just been missing that the whole time? Did everyone else know that and I was just an idiot and didn't pick up on that? And you very graciously came back and said, no, it's supposed to be like that.
And everybody does it. I did it.
Yeah.
Everybody does it. And then when he gets those memories, you suddenly feel like a dolt that you didn't notice. And you're like,
which is exactly how I felt. Thanks, Robin.
Yeah, we all did. We all did. And
but
she almost hides it, though, because with the death of Night Eyes at the end of Fool's Errand, some of that dullness, some of that lack of passion is explained.
Yes.
And you can kind of write off almost all of his behavior to that. Yes. Until you remember he's been withdrawn and not driven for 20 years. Which
he's 35, isn't he, by the time?
Yeah, he's 35 in Fool's Errand.
So I guess there's two themes that I think are just done exquisitely in Tawny Man, and you've just touched on them both. It's both the ability to self-reflect and bring out that trauma. And I guess you could argue, you could maybe disagree with Hobb here, that maybe we don't need to There are some things that if we kind of paw at them too much, it becomes an issue. That I think I saw someone online saying that, but I love that she's exploring that theme. And the second theme that she does so marvelously, as you've just said, with the three main characters of Fool's Errand, is that we're all marvelously interconnected, and you can't escape that. And I love how she does that with the physical, mental merging of these characters. You know, the cliche "no man is an island" is just brought absolutely to the fore throughout this trilogy. We are linked together emotionally in terms of our long-term goals, in terms of our short-term goals, in terms of our just present day living. There is no escaping other people in our lives. We're not hermits, and I think that those two things, those two elements, are just drawn together marvelously at the end of Tawny Man, and that's why I finished it. And I thought this is my favorite of the trilogies. And although I love the other two, especially Farseer, I think this one is an order of magnitude higher, and I'm hoping it continues.
It is, and one of the wonderful things that I find still is the fact that Fitz continually does reflect on the things he did as a younger man, and he questions himself. He's like, why did I do that? That was really stupid. And occasionally he's reminded, but you didn't know. You only had that little bit of knowledge, and you acted on what you knew.
Yes.
And that's something I've taken with me for a long, long time, in that facts aren't always the truth. Because you can have a stack of facts, but if that's not what's actually going on, you've got it wrong.
Yes.
The truth is often bigger than facts. And Fitz only learns this as he gets older and gains that perspective, learns extra facts that change what he knew at the time. Yeah. And having read it as many times as I have, I can say it grows with you, this series. People I identified with when I first started reading are, I mean, just as close to my heart, don't get me wrong, but more people have become familiar to me as I've got older, and I can see their point of view better, and I can see what they're trying to say to Fitz, and I can see what there's a beautiful range of experiences in the series that they're all so marvelously done. So, I mean, what's Shadia saying here? And Regal killed him. Pretty normal. He's depressed. I would want to stay at the cabin forever too.
And I'm pretty sure that's another plot point that is never directly said. It's something you slowly discover at different points for different readers, that Fitz physically died. And
I think that one's pretty blatant.
It wasn't just Romeo and Juliet poison that was supposed to put him to sleep.
We get Burke digging him out of his grave and, forcing his spirit back into his body.
Yes.
So yeah, he very definitely died.
But the spirit left the body before the body deceased. Is my recollection. I could be wrong there.
Yes, he fled it. Yeah. He was tortured to death ultimately, and he would have died. In the act of dying, he's had another of his shaking fits that he was prone to after the poisoning in the mountains and the attempted murder in the mountains. And it was such a horrific thought to him to have been in such physical pain and damage to now also have to deal with a fit that he flees his body. And he's like, okay, I'm coming. He's just like, I don't want it. And leaves. So his body is now lifeless.
Yes.
With nothing in it. So, and Night Eyes looks after his soul in the meantime.
Yes. Yeah.
The rather wonderful thing with that is when we open in Assassin's Quest, and Burke is trying to bring his essence back to his body, is Night Eyes saying, you can't have him, he's not yours.
Yes.
Fitz suddenly realizing that he is separate to Night Eyes and going, but I'm not yours either.
That question of ownership of people is still there.
Yeah, I'm still myself. I'm still me.
Yeah.
And claiming that life back, and then kind of regretting it. He says quite openly at the beginning of Assassin's Quest, I didn't tell them they'd done the worst thing ever by bringing me back to life because I don't want to be here. Yeah. He was really suffering in that.
I love Assassin's Quest. I love it. Those first 200 pages are gloriously written.
They're fire.
Basically take place in that cabin, full stop. And you're marvelous. And I understand. I've read a bit of the criticisms of Assassin's Quest, but I don't think they hold water. I think people misinterpret what that final book was meant to do. And what that book is trying to do, it pulls off wonderfully.
I think
But
so.
do you know what? Just going back to Fitz's mental state, though, there's one line that really kind of haunted me. I keep saying Fitz in the Fool. Fool's Fate, right?
Yes.
The titles do merge together. I don't know how you keep them separate.
Well, they do. Don't worry about it.
my one criticism of Hobb is that her titles are
rubbish.
They braid into each other. But that line where he's been fed the poison that kills his skill, and he's blabbering, and he says something along the lines of, and it's not even dwelt on, it's just said in passing, something along the lines of, and I said openly for the first time that I've considered killing myself, and I've never even mentioned that before, and that is just a throwaway comment in a paragraph that disturbs some people, and then we move on. And it goes back to that burying of the self and that inability of Fitz to ever fully come to terms with himself while he is kind of in this stunted, memoryless state. Yeah. That limits him from saying. Yeah.
And it's a remarkable thing. I mean, not least because we do get that sense of horror from the people around him. Because Fitz doesn't understand how much other people love him at all. But we see it, and we see it in their concern in that moment when he is blathering because he can't stop himself. And Fool is beside himself. He's like, how could you say that?
Yeah.
Shade is heartbroken at the idea. Dutiful is shocked at the idea. All of them suddenly get this sense of, what would we do without this guy?
Yeah.
No, you're a big part of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
But because it carries this depression, he doesn't see his own value.
He sees himself as a happy man. Yeah.
Well, he sees himself as someone that is useful.
Yes.
To people who love him. He doesn't recognize at all that they do love him, and they love him just for being.
Yes.
Like a lot of depressed people, again, it resonates with me. He feels that he has to justify his existence because that's what we do. It's not healthy. I know this.
Do you know another gripe? We do. Another gripe that I have with the way that people frame Hobb, and I'm wondering if you agree or disagree with me, and also the caveat that I haven't read Rain Wilds and I haven't read the final trilogy. People talk about Hobb as someone who punishes her characters, which is true.
Very much so.
But at the same time, people talk about Hobb as kind of breaking your heart at the end of the trilogy. And I think that is an incredibly I understand why. It's a line people say, she will destroy you in her writing.
Oh, yes.
Yes, but the way that is set up, that phrase makes it sound as though at the end of each trilogy, there is some huge, traumatic, massive death, carnage, blowout where all your favorite characters are eviscerated on the ground. And that's just not how she operates. And I think I had this misconception of Hobb, even when I was excited to read her. Yeah. The end of each trilogy was going to have several absolutely gut-wrenching moments where, someone gets stabbed and you see the pain disappear. And that's not how she operates. And I think there's a
said to any reader before they went into live ships, and if I said to you, as you opened the first pages of, Ship of Magic, and I said, if I said to you, all of these people will live and most of them will get a happy ending, you'd have been like, what the hell?
But it's going to destroy you.
All of them live.
And even the one who dies kind of gets a happy ending.
Yeah, like the main villain, you're going to kind of feel sorry for at the end.
Yeah.
The only person I was glad to see die in that series was Kyle.
Yeah.
And even then, there was no hoopla about it. There's never actually in any of the books, there's never any hoopla over a villain's death. They don't get it glorified. They just stop.
Yes.
Wrinkle, rather wonderfully, gets killed by a ferret. I love Small Ferret. Small Ferret is my hero.
Yes. Yeah.
But he didn't get a big, glorious, dramatic send-off. No. He just died. I like
there's a mischaracterization of the endings as being brutal. And they're sad, but they're not brutal. I'm struggling to find the vocabulary to differentiate. I know you're understanding what I'm saying because you articulated it very well. But there's a misapprehension there over what Hobb's sadness means. And it's a much more clever, sophisticated sadness. Even Night Eyes.
Because it's not sadness necessarily. Yes. It's catharsis. It is so emotional that no matter what you've gone through as a reader, something in the way that she's able to write these climactic scenes will resonate with you. And you will have a moment of catharsis where you cry for yourself, for your mother, for your father, for somebody in your life who's experienced something similar. You will have a moment of being able to be emotional about it.
Yeah.
Because we're often taught now's not the time to have a breakdown. We're all too busy. You can't have a breakdown right now. So we all have in us some emotion that just sits there getting heavier and getting heavier. Those of us who read know a good book is cathartic and will let you get some of those emotions out. Hobb is an absolute master at it.
Yes.
Absolute master.
I think Night Eyes is the perfect.
It can be exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just saying, I think Night Eyes is the perfect example. So I had Night Eyes' death not spoiled for me. Before I'd even read, someone said, read it or something like that. Someone said, what is the saddest death you've ever encountered in fiction? And someone commented Night Eyes from. So I knew quite early on that at some point in the series, Night Eyes was.
And I think most people do. I mean, he's quite old by the time we come back to Tawny Man.
Well, that's kind of my point, is that, okay, so I was anticipating at some point in the series, maybe when I finished it, Assassin's Quest, maybe at the height of his wolfishness, he's come into his own, and then someone is going to come out of left field and stab him into the heart, and that's how we're going to, a shocking death to Night Eyes. And that could work in the scheme of what we're trying to accomplish, but that's not what happens. Night Eyes essentially dies of old age.
Yeah, he dies in his sleep, and it's beautiful.
It's very well signposted the whole way through this novel that, look, this wolf might make it through this book, but he's not making it for very long. Yeah, and we've all had
he's old.
With older people in our lives as well.
And he's okay about it.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
He's accepted.
He makes it, yes. Yeah. And so it's sad, and you could maybe argue that it's I wouldn't even say it's the saddest death in fiction. You could argue it's the most emotionally resonant death. You could make that case, but it just comes back to the point that Hobb doesn't just play with your emotions to get that shock sadness so that you will have that emotional jerk and then buy her next book.
And it's not a manipulative scene, I think, is what it comes down to. You could argue that was the case in Assassin's Apprentice with Nosy. That could be construed as manipulative. It works in terms of the story in the way that Fitz develops, believing that Barrett was capable of killing a puppy. Kind of explains a lot of the way he grows up. So it works as not being just there for the shock value. Yes. Killing Night Eyes wasn't a shock. It wasn't done just to make you emotional. We're told he's old. We're shown Fitz denying that Night Eyes is aging. We see Fitz fighting the aging he's seeing in Night Eyes. And Night Eyes telling him, no, you don't get to interfere with this. And being really angry that Fitz interfered the first time. And I loved that. I really
he tries to put his life energy into Night Eyes. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah. He's just healed him after choking on some fish bones. And
that's what it is, yeah.
When he goes in to heal Night Eyes' body, he sees the weakness. And so he uses the skill to give Night Eyes more strength, to fuel his body to heal. And Night Eyes is truly offended that Fitz has done this without his consent, because consent's always, it's another big thing in the series. And so none of this is manipulative. This is life. This is, if you've got an elderly parent, if you've got somebody in your family who has something degenerative, there is a point at which continuing to fight is denying reality, because that person will often be ready to go far earlier than the people who love them are ready to let them go. And Night Eyes tells him, no, when it's my time, I'm going. Stop interfering.
Yep.
So when we do get that at the end of the book, it's done with a sense of joy from Night Eyes that he can now get to the next bit. And he says to Fitz, are you coming?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not done yet. It's like, oh, I always had to go first anyway,
I love that page. It's like 2 or 3 paragraphs as well, isn't it? It's short but gorgeous.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And so it's almost, and I don't call it a sad death. It's one of the most beautiful deaths I've ever read, because there is this sense of release for Night Eyes, the sense of he's free now. He can, wherever it is his spirit is going to go, he's okay with it.
Yeah.
And the sadness, obviously, is that we have this attachment to Fitz and he's grieving. So we grieve with him because we've also lost a friend. We've lost Night Eyes. We love Night Eyes. We're going to be sad he's gone.
Yeah. I'm listening. I'm just I'm finding it on the page as well as you're talking.
One of my favorite things is as we move into Golden Fall and the Fitz is now having to establish himself at Buckkeep again. And he's brought back into Ketrican's space.
Yes.
And that's where he grieves properly, where he actually starts to cry. Yes. And the Fool is quite hurt by this because Fool wanted to be what helped Fitz grieve. And so he feels like, well, that was my job. And Fitz struggles to explain to him that, yeah, but you're sad because I'm sad. Ketrican's sad for the same reason I'm sad.
Yes.
She misses Night Eyes too.
Yes.
So he's almost
offended by it for a minute, isn't he, or something like that? But sorry, I think he was trying to consider his own emotions, his emotional response to Ketrican's emotion. There was a really lovely line where he was trying to, in real time, gauge how he felt about Ketrican's feelings, which I thought, was he trying to claim? Is he trying to claim ownership? Maybe I'm misremembering this.
For me, it was a recognition that somebody else felt the lack of Night Eyes instead of just noticing his sadness.
Yeah,
she felt her own sadness for losing Night Eyes because Night Eyes had a place in her heart. And because she grieved in a similar way to Fitz, that he could recognize that, oh, she's grieving for Night Eyes. She's not just sad because I'm sad. He was then able to freely grieve.
Yes.
Because he wasn't having to hold up a front for somebody else.
Yes.
And I thought that was beautiful. Again, that there's so many forms of love on display in these books, which I just think is exceptionally done. I mean, I'm a fan.
I gathered. Would you mind if I read that page of Night Eyes' death?
Please,
I think it's
please.
Gorgeous. So I'll start with I'll do it when they're in their shared dream almost, kind of, and yeah. So there were fat mice hastily harvesting seed heads in the tall grass, but we passed them by. At the top of the hill, we paused. We walked the spine of the hill, smelling the morning, tasting the lip of the day to come. There would be deer in the forested creek bottoms. They would be healthy and strong and fat, a challenge to any pack, let alone a single wolf. He would need me at his side to hunt those. He would have to come back for them later. Nevertheless, he halted on top of the ridge. The morning wind riffled his fur, and his ears were perked as he looked down to where we knew they must be. Good hunting. I'm going now, my brother, he spoke with great determination. Alone? You can't bring a buck down alone, I sighed with resignation. Wait, I'll get up and come with you. Wait for you? Not likely. I've always had to run ahead of you and show you the way. Swift as thought, he slipped away from me, running down the hillside like a cloud's shadow when the wind blows. My connection to him frayed away as he went, scattering and floating like dandelion fluff in the wind. Instead of small and secret, I felt our bond go wide and open, as if he had invited all the witted creatures in the world in to share our joining. All the web of life on the whole hillside suddenly swelled within my heart, linked and meshed and woven through with one another. It was too glorious to contain. I had to go with him. A morning this wondrous must be shared. Wait, I cried, and in shouting the word, I woke myself. Nearby the fool sat up, his hair tousled. I blinked. My mouth was full of salve and wolf hair, my fingers buried deep in his coat. I clutched him to me, and my grip sighed his last stilled breath out of his lungs. But Night Eyes was gone. Cold rain was cascading down past the mouth of the cave. Gorgeous. Incredible writing.
It is.
And yeah, I feel your emotion and I mirror it back to you. On a line by line level, that prose is immaculate. Every image is doing something to build up this wondrous natural sense, which again confirms what Night Eyes is feeling. This is natural. This is my time to go, and you can come with me, but don't you interfere with it. And you also have that wonderful line about the wit and them opening that wit sense, which is why I think you're right that it's not a tragic, sad ending, although it is extremely emotional. Because what he's doing is he's again exposing that idea of all life and all of our connections braiding together. We're not an island. We're so intertwined with one another. And what Night Eyes and Fitz has is something special, but it's also in some ways not unique. And she does all of that. And hang on.
It's almost, by inviting the rest of the world in, Night Eyes is pretty much saying to Fitz, don't close yourself off now.
It's this much. It's this much. It's this much. In a book series, yay big. Fabulous.
Oh, I mean, I've said it. This is the way I explain Hobb to people in terms of how effective she is. And that she spends most of a book tying strings around your heart. You don't notice she's doing it.
Yeah.
But then she uses those strings to suddenly rip out your heart. And then with it in her fist, she will punch you in the soul. That's what she does. And you can read a book and it can be long and lovely and lush and beautiful and descriptive and just magical. And then there might be a 4-word sentence that floors you.
Yes.
And there are several of them in the first half of the series, and there's a couple in the last couple of series. But things as simple as I am content.
Yes. Yeah.
Suddenly you're like, okay, that's a lot to wrap up this series, but that works. It's like, wow,
yes.
Okay. Yeah, she can do a punchy sentence. She doesn't do it very often, but when she does, they're incredibly powerful because she doesn't use them often. And you do get the sense that she's really emphasizing this point. And the work's been done. She's done the work tying her strings around your heart. She's made these connections between you and the characters. She's given you these opportunities to form bonds. Yeah. And there's plenty of them. And it's up to you which ones stick. But they're going to mean something. They're not just throwaway characters. There are characters that we've had that you know from Farseer and have showed up again in Tawny Man, who we still hear mention of in Fitz and the Fool.
Yes.
Extras, not even tertiary characters. They barely have names. But if you're paying attention, they've been a part of the story the whole way through. There's a couple that I've become very attached to, just through virtue of having read it so often and noticing them and realizing that they've been part of this tapestry of story the whole way through. Mm-hmm. And they're not huge, they're not massive elements, but they're there. And they had little moments where what they did affected what Fitz does. Beautiful. Yes. Each study is going to be there. You know, the heart of the pack, wolves have no kings, you know, dogs do not grieve as men do. There's so many. It's just so beautiful. So beautiful.
Yeah. I'm curious, just to slightly move adjacently, and you can't even say anything to this, but I'm deeply curious about how it's all going to wrap up. Because, first of all, my understanding, and I could be wrong here, is that Tawny Man was supposed to be the final trilogy, and that's my understanding. Someone said that to me, and everything after that was spontaneous or to that point unplanned. So I'm curious. But
very much to that point unplanned.
And you know what? If it ended there, if it ended there, wonderful.
And here's the thing, because I read it, and those of us who read it before then with me didn't have a trilogy in existence called Fitz and the Fool. Yes. As we finished Tawny Man, we had no sense of who was going to make it. Yes. Because this was the culmination. And the way that final book, Fool's Fate, is written, it's Fool's fate. This is the fate of the Fool.
Yes.
Or is the Fool Fitz because he's an idiot? He's an idiot. Yeah. And we've lost Night Eyes already at the end of Fool's Errand. So you're like, okay, life and death situation. I mean, these are high stakes we're playing for in Fool's Fate. Either one of them could die. Both of them could die at any point. Fool does die. I was beside myself.
In a horrific manner as well.
Totally.
It's brutal. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
So, people can read it now and be like, oh, it was devastating. I'm like, no, you don't get it because you know he's going to come back somehow. We didn't.
Yeah, which is true. I absolutely did, because we've got the Fitz.
Not knowing that the first time I read it was absolutely the most gut-wrenching reading I've ever done, because I'm like, I don't want to read anymore because he's dead. Properly beside myself.
Yeah.
And then as the story unfolds and we get those beautiful return of threads that felt like nothing, with the rooster crown and the feathers and the way that memories got put in by dragons, and you're like, oh, okay, oh, wow, okay, this is now a whole big thing. Became this magical moment in a magical place.
Mm-hmm.
And they exposed each other's heart to each other. And Fitz has to accept, I had to accept the differences, that there were far more differences than likenesses between us.
Yeah,
because he isn't human.
Yeah.
And you see Fitz kind of brush over that all the way through the series, but he has to face it in this moment as he's healing Fool's body.
Mm-hmm.
He has to recognize, wow, okay, he's not human. He is different. Structurally, he is not the same as me. And that understanding kind of helping him be okay when they have that gloriously tragic, ragged parting. Because they're not.
Yes, ragged is the word, isn't it?
It's that disconnected. They both sort of left threads for each other and they just never quite married in. And so it's this ragged kind of maybe might have been farewell of one day. And I remembered before the rest of the books were written on I can't even remember what site it was so many years ago, someone being heartbroken that they may never see each other again. And I would just say to these people, no, Jinnah told him that his greatest love would wind in and out of his life all the rest of his days. He will be back. Whether we see it or not, they're going to be entwined forever.
I'm at a disadvantage here because I've still got 7 books to go. That's an advantage, isn't it? 7 books to go.
Oh, there's some wonderful things to come.
More books to read, and Anyway, one thing I've really enjoyed up until this point that we haven't touched on, but now that we're talking about the Fool, is I'm trying to think of a better non-traditional relationship than Fitz and the Fool. I can't really think of any pair that is so deeply enmeshed yet different. Yeah, and there's a romantic element there. There's a platonic element there. There's obviously with the Fool the question of gender. Although, is it really? Does it have to be a question at the same time?
That's right.
But like everything about this pairing is unusual, and I adore that. It doesn't in the hands of a lesser
the attention that it should when we consider, how prevalent, how focused currently. As a society we are around gender questions and relationship questions and how do we define things. And this doesn't get mentioned as often as I think perhaps it should, because I think it's a beautiful example of, but it's just beautiful. Friends can be loving toward each other. People who love each other don't have to be in a physical relationship with each other. Love doesn't have to mean something sexual. And yet it can be more than just friendship. It doesn't need explanations if both of you are aware what your own personal boundaries are. There's a magic to that. There's a not even an innocence, but there's a purity to it that I just think is wonderful to just accept. This is a person I love. What shape their body is at the moment isn't part of the equation. They have a huge discussion about it in Assassin's Quest. Do you love Molly for her plumbing? No. Then what does it matter what the plumbing is? I love that that's so blatantly discussed in Assassin's Quest, that he really puts Fitz on the spot. Why do you love her then? You don't love her just because she's a girl. enforcing Fitz to really measure what it is he's trying to say.
Yes.
And very few, particularly young people, think to have that discussion even just with themselves. You know,
Yes.
what is it that I'm attracted to about this person? Is it this? Is it that? Is it the other? What does this mean to me? What does it mean to them? What are our boundaries? Because we can make that, we can form those rules.
Yes.
And it's, I mean, it occasionally is toxic. Because I said this to somebody online. Oh, look, the Fitz and the Fool, they're really honest with each other, except when they're not. And, and there's an element of toxicity to that, because they both rely on the fact that they trust each other to lie to each other occasionally.
Yes.
But that's the nature of their relationship. It's nobody else's relationship. It's their relationship.
You know, there's one scene that maybe slightly deflated me in Fool's Fate. Deflated is the wrong word, but I was kind of hoping for more in an otherwise stellar book. Fitz abandons the Fool, properly abandons the Fool, for good reason, like to save his life. But at the same time, their reunion, I guess if you're being charitable, you could call it, there was lots of unspoken feeling there. But I was hoping for a bit more of a confrontation on the page, or a little bit more of a sticking on the fact that Fitz did abandon his friend. I think there's one maybe nitpick I would have with the book, is that I kind of wanted more, not necessarily fallout, I'm not looking for the drama, but a bit more reflection on that abandonment that did occur and took up the first third of the novel. I feel like once they kind of got back together, they had a wee talk about it and then they moved on. I don't know if you agree.
I think, and I've mentioned this to someone else on Discord this morning, I occasionally need somebody new to the series to remind me how it feels, because I'm so far removed from that now, and I've got so many lenses to the situations, and I've looked at it from so many angles that I forget that this is something that you can feel. You can feel like, why would he do that?
Yes.
For me, they both know in the moment what's happened. The Fool knows that Fitz has left him there because Fitz doesn't want to see him die.
Yes.
Fitz knows that Fool knows that's what he's done.
Yes.
They're both aware, very much like in the relationship issue. Their relationship is such that they understand. However angry Fool is, he's not shocked by it. He's not surprised. And he also knows enough about Fitz, about this catalytic kind of force that Fitz has, that change is going to happen. Where Fitz is, wherever he is, whatever's going on, something's going to happen. All Fool has to do is be in the vicinity to help kind of push things in whatever direction he wants it to go. But purely because of where he was, I mean, he's at Buckkeep, the witness stones are there, he knows they're pillars because of what Fitz has told him, he knows that the magic is still there because of what's happening with the Elderling people that they've just met from Bingtown. All of the pieces fell into place in a way that meant Fool was like, I can still get out. I can still make my own way there. And he does. What I find really lovely is that the fallout, as we say, the how could you leave me behind? It's not vocal.
No.
But it's very on page. They arrive at Aslevial after having done all of the stuff with the Hetgird, and they finally arrive there. And where is the Fool? He's on a cliff top, waiting for the sunset to be all dramatic.
Yes, it's a very dramatic.
I'm here already, bitch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. And now I'm not going to talk to you because you left me.
Yeah, it goes on back to 10. Yeah.
And it's how friends behave. You piss off your friend, they don't necessarily want a big, deep and meaningful, but they're going to be dramatic about it.
You know what? Just always to interrupt you. I saw. This is going to sound so dated, but I saw a meme online. That phrase. I saw a meme. I need to share it with you. Basically, it's something along the lines of: listen, when you travel with your spouse and you love them to pieces, but at some point in the week of vacation, you'll have a little fight, and then there's that awkward moment where you're still together, but you're walking 20 paces away from each other for about 5 minutes, and that made me laugh when I saw that. And that's exactly what it's like
in Aslevial. It takes a reasonable amount of time for them to talk to each other again, because they're just shitty with each other.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's not a deal breaker situation. They both know they're angry. They both know they're going to get over it. They both just know the other one needs a moment. Just okay. I just won't talk to you for a while until you calm down. And their connection, their relationship, their whatever you want to call it, is it's not one of, it is my favorite relationship in everything I've ever read, because it's so nuanced, because it has so many different layers, and because it has so many different layers of acceptance. Yes. Because Fitz struggles with some of it. And that's important that we see that. So, and I love it. I just think it's beautiful.
You know, I do appreciate that, and maybe you would interpret this differently, but for me, there is certainly, I think it's pretty much on the page, that the fool is attracted to Fitz.
Oh, yes.
Romantically, I saw one person online who disputed that. I think they're wrong.
They're wrong.
And there's that line, and there's that line that Fitz says to the fool. He says it a few times, like, because you want to bed me. And
I will not bed with you. And the fool says, I never expect that from you, because I know it's your boundary. I would never want you to
do that if you
because you're not okay with it.
And there's a sense of almost horror there from the fool when this line kind of comes up. It's almost like it doesn't quite compute. Kind of similar to the revulsion that Night Eyes feels when he is kind of healed against his own will. It feels like very similar, this kind of sense of, what are you doing that was never part of our relationship that we've established with one another. My wife is always, it's very funny about relationships, because whenever there's even a quasi-romantic element that comes up in a piece of fiction, she is very skeptical. My wife, 9 times out of 10, when we watch her or whatever, if there's a love interest, she will just say, "Listen, what is the point of that love interest?" And you know what? 9 out of 10 times she's right. That love interest, especially in film, that love interest is there for Hollywood to tick. Yeah,
it's box. Just to tick a box. Yeah.
And so she has made me very acutely aware of purposeless, I don't know how to articulate it, romantic romance on the page that is just there to cause a bit of spice or drama. And
it's a valid criticism.
Trained me in that way, because it allows me to see instances of romance, whether requited or not, that are so much more sophisticated and are steeped in what's going on throughout the whole story. And so I really do enjoy that aspect of non-requited attraction, different attraction. Don't know how you'd articulate it.
It's a love that's, because for me it is a love relationship.
Yes.
The fool loves Fitz in a way that says, I accept your boundaries.
Yes.
I want to be as much a part of your life as you will let me, and I am capable of being, and you are capable of being. And I won't ask of you something I already know you're not okay with. I already know that. And he says to Fitz, and now you've forced us both to remember those words.
I remember that line.
And
it's a
it
best
broke
line.
My heart.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned it earlier as a teacher.
Yeah.
Some words just stick with you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm forced now to remember those words.
Yes. We all have those moments that we've said and that we've received.
Yeah. That just, it's devastating words. And so, yes, there is a love, quite a profound love between them. And the fact, it all ties together in that the fool isn't quite human and Fitz is very human, and he does adore Molly, and there's this sense that it's a soul deep connection between he and fool that kind of doesn't matter who else is in their lives.
Yeah. I'm just trying to find that page. I brought the book
argument.
Yeah, it goes over. It's two arguments in the one chapter, isn't it? They come away and then they come back.
Oh, for me, it's capital letters. The argument, which begins when he discovers that Fool has been Amber.
Amber, yes. I'm trying
to goes on for quite a big portion of the book. But when they're not talking, it's winter at Buckkeep, and they're just kind of both going about their days, kind of ignoring each other because they've had this awkwardness between them. And in that time frame, Fitz believes that Fool understands that no, I'm not okay with this. You've been a woman thing. It's very distressing and I don't like it. But he's still doing his job and bringing up the breakfast tray every day. And every day, the maid puts a posy on the tray.
Yes.
So every day, the fool, unknowing of this interaction, is receiving a breakfast tray with this posy that he thinks is from Fitz. So they're both working on completely different sets of facts. So when they have this, when it all comes to a head and they have this row, the hurt in both of them, it's really quite devastating because they are so important to each other and they do really care about each other. And they've just both built this thing in their heads that isn't quite what the other one thinks it is.
Yeah.
And it's hurtful to both of them to have to face the reality of it. That Fitz has to face the fact that, yes, Fool does love me that much and I've got to find a way to be okay with it. And Fool has to go, Fitz is never going to be open about loving me and I've got to find a way to be okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there's this maid who has recognized who Lord Golden is and is telling him, I still love you.
Yeah.
And she goes almost unnoticed. She's one of the few people who when he flees Buckkeep, he has made arrangements for. He's bought her a cottage.
Yes, he did, didn't he? Yeah.
You know, so while this big dramatic argument is happening between Fitz and Fool, there's this poor young woman whose unrequited love has recognized it and has cared for her enough to go, well, I really appreciated that you love me. And that's lovely. And, you know, thanks. Yeah. Love is a good thing. And he's acknowledged, I recognize that you care for me.
Yes.
You know, and that's all happening all very quietly. No big hubbub. It's just happening.
Probably about page total. Yeah. Those two character interactions. Can I read the page of the argument? Is that okay?
Please.
I've got it. I quite like doing the readings. So I'll start with Fitz's what would you call it? Confrontation, unnecessary confrontation.
Yeah.
I'll read about a page. I took a deep breath and managed the Elfbark's black mood. I spoke honestly and bluntly. And you know that I love you, Fool. As a man loves his dearest friend, I feel no shame in that. But to let Jack or Starling or anyone think that we take it beyond friendship's bound, that you would want to lie with me is... I paused. I waited for his agreement. It did not come. Instead, he met my eyes with his open amber gaze. There was no denial in them. I love you, he said quietly. I set no boundaries on my love, none at all. Do you understand me? Only too well, I fear, I replied, and my voice shook. I took a deep breath and my words grated out. I would never... Do you understand me? I would never desire you as a bed partner, never. He glanced aside from me. A faint rose came to his cheeks, not of shame, but of some other deep passion. He spoke quietly, in a controlled voice. And that, too, is a thing that we have both known for years, a thing that has never needed speaking, those words that I must now carry with me for the rest of my life. He turned to look at me, but his eyes seemed blinded. We could have gone all our lives and never had this conversation. Now you have doomed us both to recall it forever. He turned and began to walk away toward his bedchamber. His pace was measured, as if he were truly ill. Then he stopped and looked back at me. Anger gleamed in his eyes, and it shocked me that he could look at me so. Did you ever truly believe that I might seek from you something that you had no desire to share my desire for? Well do I know how distasteful you would find that. Well do I know that seeking that from you would irreparably damage all that we have shared. So I have always avoided this very discussion that you have forced upon our friendship. That word forced. It was ill done, Fitz. Ill done and unnecessary. And then they get into the garden, the gardener, I should say.
Yeah, the posies.
Well done. Yeah. You know, often when writers write paragraphs of dialogue, like what each character has a speech, sometimes my hackles go up because it's so unusual in the real world for paragraph, person B, person A, person B. But here it works. Here it really works.
I think it does, and not least because they do very much care for each other. And so they're both in that moment very intent on making sure they're making the point they want to make.
Yes. Which
is the problem, because Fool is telling him, please don't say these words.
Yep.
because now we're both doomed to remember them. And again, Fool has said, I have always known it was a hard limit for Fitz. He's always known it.
Yeah.
And the conflict in Fitz is heartbreaking, not least because there is the social, there's a word, I can't think. It's like a black mark against him socially for being in a same-sex partnership. Yeah. But there's also this sense that he doesn't know how to love somebody. He's cut that away from himself. He doesn't know how to receive love, and he's not good at showing love. And we see that when they're in the coterie training, when they've all been together for a while, Fool hasn't joined them, and then he does join them not long before they set sail, and they're looking for a way to connect. I think it was Thick to Fitz. And the Fool says, oh, okay, well, I will join with Fitz because he doesn't like being touched, Fool. So he's connected to Fitz using the skill mark on his thumb.
Yes.
And he asks 3 times, I think it is, are you sure you want this?
Mm-hmm. And
Fitz is like, yeah, get on with it. And he finds himself in a really profound bond with Fool. And he says, I love the sentence, I remember it word for word. I found myself turning toward it as a flower turns to the sun.
Oh, I remember that line, yes. Yeah.
And he's so horrified at himself that in panic, he flings himself out of the bond. I wanted that I don't know how to deal with wanting that connection, that soul deep love that I think everybody to some degree seeks in their lives, is to have somebody they can trust 100%, that they can give all of themselves to. Yes. And he has that with Fool. He in that bond, he feels that with Fool, and it frightens him. It doesn't comfort him. It doesn't give him a sense of joy. It frightens him, the thought that he could be part of a relationship that deep. And I think that just speaks volumes about who Fitz is as a person, how damaged he is, how everything in his life has affected him so deeply that the thought of feeling that connection is terrifying to him.
I mean, he essentially becomes Chade in Tawny Man. He becomes the man behind the walls. Yeah, but he does it willingly as opposed to having been placed in that role. I think the other thing, it's another maybe minor theme in the series, you could say, is the commitment to throwing yourself in something 100% or not. And the main so many characters find themselves standing on the precipice and often just backing away. And a lot of the tragedy that does come from the series is from characters backing away or waiting too late, as the case may be. And I think Fitz is that. And I think one thing I also enjoy about the series in general, I mean, this is something I love about fantasy. One of my minor signs of a really good fantasy book is how well the magic integrates with the theme. I think that's always a good signpost that the novel is doing well. For example, Malazan, I think, does it really well. You know, the concepts of Malazan, of lack of certainty and things. I know you haven't read it, I believe, right?
I haven't. No.
A big core of Malazan is overconfidence and lack of certainty, and that is in the magic system, which is kind of all about not quite being sure where the limits are and things like that. But one of the thematic concerns of Hobb is, again, this ability, whether it's a good idea, whether you should push yourself 100%. And I think that is very much typified in the magic system too, where if you push yourself both with wit and skill too far, there's a question as which is that's a good thing or not. And the magic system seems to imply that it's not a good thing in both, although I think the wit is more complex than the skill. The skill, it seems to be genuinely damaging if you push yourself over the edge. Whereas with the wit, it's a bit more nuanced. And that idea of if you throw yourself into this thing fully, you might damage your wit partner. It's almost seen as an unnatural bond. So it's interesting that the magic system seems to speak against throwing yourself in 100%, while at the same time, Hobb very often in the relationships seems to want characters to push themselves forward more. There's an interesting kind of tension there.
There is. And I think there's a moment that I find really clever where they've arrived at the Out Islands. Swift is busy hurling himself at pretty much every animal he meets, and he meets what did they call it? A rob or something. It made me think of a raccoon. And he sort of offers to bond with this raccoon, and Webb catches him, and he gets really cross with Swift, and he says to him, "You don't know anything about this creature's life.
Yeah,
you can't bond with him. Does he have a mate? Has he got kids? Where does he live? Where will you live?"
Yeah.
For me, the wit magic is more about, if you're going to form a bond with a particular beast, you have to respect it. You have to be aware that you are an equal partner, that whatever you're bonded with has their own needs, and you must respect them. They're not just a pet you can talk to and control. We meet Rolf, and he's got his bear, and we meet Holly with her bird, and we obviously later meet Webb with his bird. You must respect your partner.
Yes.
When you're not bonded, you have an obligation to not abuse your gift, and yet still treat all of these other animals with respect. You are not the boss of them, ultimately. So you can throw yourself into it wholeheartedly, but you must respect these other creatures. The skill, I find I've got to a point where I find it almost very Zen, almost Buddhist, in this sense of, once you master the skill, you kind of could evolve mentally beyond the need for your body and kind of go, I don't need you anymore. Pew. So that's not so much for me a question of commitment, but the addictive nature of the skill.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Addiction and compulsion is a big part of the skill. And for me, it was
important. That's important, that it's addictive.
Yeah, for me, I kind of also had the analogy there with the skill of mental health. So I have a bit of a health anxiety that I have to keep tabs on, or it can kind of, the Googling of the symptoms that people joke about. I genuinely, my symptoms, I think I should just get a Nokia brick so I can't Google my symptoms.
You're not allowed to do that. Google MD is not your friend.
Genuinely, but when I was reading, especially in, I think it was Fool's Errand, about the description of the skill, that is the mental spark that came off in my brain, the idea that he can't stop, just teetering and just having a little and then getting swept away by it. And that's exactly how it feels with some of the mental conditions that we all carry to some extent.
You can't control
it. For
it.
me, I'll just have a quick look. My ear looks very green today, so I'm just going to Google green ear and see what I have. And then get swept away by it. I think that's the analogy that kept coming up in my mind as I was reading about this. Yeah.
And only when you've got the control, only when you know you can trust your own control over it, can you join that skill river and be able to direct what you're doing rather than being swept away by it. And the fascinating thing, I think, for me, is we learn in Tawny Man that Elfbark cuts off the skill, and yet Verity was using it for years. So how strong was his potential? How much damage are we doing through ignorance? It could be used across the board for just about anything. If you don't know everything about something, stop, because you could be making it worse. We get this sense of what's the word I want? Untapped potential when knowledge is lost. There's
and that's Fitz, the whole series, the whole trilogy. Untapped potential is what he's done to himself. Yeah,
absolutely, and has been done to him, all unknowing. He's been addicted to this drug, Elfbark, thinking they were doing something that would help him because he was suffering pain because of the beatings and the skill suggestion that Galen left in his head, and the damage that was done in subsequent beatings and subsequent poisonings and all of the physical trauma his body went through. Here's this drug that not only will soothe your physical pain, but can soothe your skill headaches, even though it then perpetuates itself into a gloomy mood and feeling downhearted and feeling these black clouds of dispirited, everything is pointless. So now you're depressed. So now the skill is calling to you because it makes you feel whole and part of the world. And so that then that addiction to the skill comes back, and it becomes this horribly cyclical, inwardly spiraling horror story of addiction, which is what addiction does.
I was going to say, as if only there was a real world counterpart to a depressive drug that people take routinely to forget their woes.
Exactly. And she does a really good job. I mean, we get it a little bit more blatantly with Brash and Liveships, where when somebody is addicted to something, it's not their fault. And it doesn't matter how wonderful a person they are. The addiction has control. And it can take a lot of hard work to win back control once you've been addicted to something. And once you've been addicted to something, it doesn't take much to fall off the wagon. And I think that she does it very graciously with Brashen, because she never highlights it.
Yes, yeah.
She just points out that, he's using this drug again. Look, his life isn't doing so good. Yeah. He's trying, he can't help it.
And we're talking about people claiming one another and owning one another, and in another sense, addiction is just something that owns you. And so this is why Hobb
it takes away your agency.
Same thing, just on a different level.
Brashen wants desperately to be free of this drug and to get his life together so that he can then go back to Bingtown and be this, returning hero kind of person. And that's what he desperately wants to do. That's his goal. And yet he still can't stop himself from feeding this addiction. And every time he spends his money on this drug, that's not being able to go back to Bingtown as this returning hero. He's causing his own failure, and he knows that he's doing it, and he still can't stop.
Yes.
And it's, again, it's not like a lot of books, when they want to talk about addiction, will make it a massively big, obvious theme. And we're now going to talk about addiction, and it's going to show you all the effects on the family, and it's going to show you all the effects socially. That's exactly what Robin Hobb is doing in Liveships around Brashen, but it's just part of the bigger overall story. We see that their family imploded when they kicked him out. We see the fallout in his family from that. We see what it does to Brashen, we see what it does to the people around him, and we see how it continues to affect his life. He's not the main story. No, he's a B story, if that. He's there to support the rest of the characters.
Absolutely.
But his addiction has impacts all over the place because everybody's connected. This interwoven nature of humanity, of we're part of the whole.
The layering of theme is just sublime. The fact that we keep organically coming back to these themes again and again and again, and those themes themselves interweave. There's one theme. I know our time is a bit short because it's approaching midnight here, but there's one thing I do want to talk about. Which is the theme of fatherhood that we've not spoken about. I love in Tawny Man, Fitz has kind of 3 children and kind of no children. Now, I think half is definitely his child. I mean, that one is indisputable. Obviously, a child being adopted does not make them any less your child.
No, not at all.
At the same time, he's also treated as a ward in some way. There's still some distance there on Fitz's part, which is why I say in some ways he has no children, because it's this really interesting thing where you're approaching this idea of Fitz as a father, and yet Fitz never, I think, even really uses the word father for himself, or very, very sparingly. His children, his children, all 3 of them, are littered throughout this series, and pop up over and over and over again, and yet it's something.
And he can't claim them. The children of his flesh he can't claim, and the child he can claim is not of his flesh. And there's this beautiful sense of repetition, and the Fool talks about cycles in Farseer and how it's not the same, but it's the same. Everything just repeats. So we get chivalry leaving Fitz behind to keep him safe and for Burrick to raise him. So we get Hap being abandoned and Fitz will raise him. We get Swift running away from Burrick and Fitz will look after him. We get there are so many children at various points of the story being fathered by fathers who aren't theirs. And the sense that they're all trying to undo their own trauma with the next child, this generational trauma, sort of cycling in on itself it's it's timely in this era of this is the generation that's going to break the cycle. You know,
Yes.
we've become more aware of trauma and what it does to ourselves and our children, and we're all very conscious of trying to get it right for the next generation.
Yes.
So,
but do you know there's that. Sorry, you finish first. I don't want to steamroll you. I was gonna say, so I'm gonna spoil the most recent Spider-Man live action movie. Where have you seen it? And No Way Home, Far From Home, one it was, one of the home ones. And at the end of that trilogy, Peter Parker has been wiped from everyone's mind, or Spider-Man has been wiped from everyone's mind, and he sees MJ across the street or in the coffee shop, and he decides, should I speak to her? She seems to recognize who I am a bit. Maybe we could rekindle this. And he goes, no, I don't want to do that to her. And he walks away. And that's this lovely moment. And I'm like, what are you doing? That is not your choice. she has genuinely, she has said to you, literally, explicitly, as they're having their last cuddle, like whatever it was, remember me, I don't want this to happen. You have the opportunity to say, hey, MJ, listen, this is what happened. Let's just, you should probably know this. And the movie frames it as this kind of heroic, sacrificial part on Spider-Man Peter Parker's world. And that drove me mental when I saw that movie.
But it is that thing. It is that trope is a thing that heroes don't want to put the people close to them at risk. They don't want to put them in harm's way. And so given the opportunity to take them out of harm's way, they do. And that's what Fitz does in Assassin's Quest when he accepts that if I go back to Molly, you know, suddenly Nettle is at risk. I have to leave her with Burke. I have to keep her safe, only to find in Tawny Man that Nettle's still in danger because that's just who she is.
And I love that Dutiful confronts, and this is what I wanted with Spider-Man. I wanted someone to confront Spider-Man, go, you idiot. And Dutiful does that. And in that scene, Dutiful, you know, Fitz kind of goes, you're interfering. Just know that the line is something like, just know that you've been spoiling something I spent years to try and keep. And Dutiful goes, it's not up to you. It's never been up to you.
I'm sorry. I'm king and waiting. I'm making the call.
Yes. This thing that has been framed, and a lot of people kind of see as a sacrificial thing of this man walking away from his issues. Oh my goodness. It's the opposite. And I love that Dutiful takes him to task. This 15-year-old boy just goes, absolutely not, moving on. And I see Ben is enjoying my rant, which is what but genuinely, I was so glad that Hobb has addressed that trope, because it's usually blokes as well who go, no, they can't possibly understand my pain, and they walk into the distance. And sometimes that pain is legitimate, but that pain is also self-enforced and not always in the best interest of the people who they are ostensibly protecting. So I love that as the conclusion.
Nettle say to him, Nettle is like, no, I don't know what I'm doing here, because I wasn't raised here.
Yes.
I was raised as a beekeeper's daughter.
Yes.
So she feels out of place, and Fitz can see that she feels out of place, and he suddenly realizes that, oh, I might have been wrong.
Yeah. I love that Nettle just goes, I'm pissed off at you. Yeah. She goes, look, I'm angry at you. And we know as readers that they will speak again. And Molly too, she goes, I don't want to speak to you. I understand what you did. I understand your rationale. I get it. I don't want to see you.
I have a husband to grieve and 5 children to look after, and I don't have time for this shit.
Yes, yeah, exactly. He kind of walks into the room and puts his foot in the door and says, I've made this promise. And I'm kind of going, well, listen, I'm glad it worked out for you at the end of the novel, but from my perspective, this poor woman has just had a whole lot done for her in a week. And it's not all about, you're doing something that you think is sacrificial, but is also kind of self-indulgent at the same time.
Very.
And Hobb kind of leaves that an open question, and it resolves very well for Fitz, which I'm very happy for him, because I think that man deserves a happy ending. But I think also you could have resolved that a different way and also have made it very justifiable given the character.
A lot of people struggle with the way that was handled, and aren't happy with at all with the fact that it wasn't left for a later book.
Okay.
Because I know I was upset that Bart died off page. Like,
you told me.
I was really angry about that. I'm not okay with this. And which I have included in the letter I have posting to Robin Hobb. That's one of the very few things I'm not happy about.
I hope it's your first line.
It's not. It's in there. Because I have very few complaints, but that's one of them.
But you know what? We spoke about the fact that all the villains, when they die off page, or when they die on page, it's very minimal.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, isn't it?
It is, and this is the thing though, is I don't necessarily want to grieve for the villains as a reader. Just selfishly, I want to grieve for Burke.
Yes.
And I felt that I didn't get the chance to grieve as much as I wanted to, which is ridiculous because, I could have closed the book and grieved, but no.
But you know what? I think, not to get too personal, every single person bar one in my life who has passed away, I have found out through social media.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, but it is sad. But at the same time, it's not necessarily someone posting a Facebook update saying RIP, although that does happen. But you hear via text just to let you know so and so passed away. It kind of is reminiscent of what happens in the present day.
Yeah, it's far more real.
It's very rare that you're in the room with them, or even in the vicinity. You find out at a distance.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that is true. I'm still not okay with it, but yes, it's true. But my thing is that we never, for all that we had the moments that we saw Molly and Burke and the children through Fitz's skill, we never got to let Molly be a grieving widow.
Yes.
They spent a lot of years together in what is clearly a healthy relationship. And they had a number of children together. They've raised some wonderful children. Their children they seem like lovely people. Nettle has a grudge, but that's okay. She's entitled. There's the removal of Burke from the equation felt too easy.
Okay.
I wanted that to be more fraught, more difficult, because that's not going to be an easy rebuilding of a relationship, because Burke is the father figure to Fitz, which in a really strange way now makes Fitz and Molly siblings. Yeah. And it's strange and it's odd. And while I don't have a problem, I never have had a problem with Burke being with Molly. Now that Fitz is back in the picture, the dynamic becomes awkward.
Yes.
Because Molly thought he was dead.
Do you know, I like that line.
Option then.
I like that line, and you'll know it better than me. Burke, I think he says it twice actually.
I was always the better man for her.
You would have taken her, but I was the better man. Yeah. Which I think is a really wonderful microcosm of standing up. Yeah. You would have been wrong.
And I agreed with it. I was in there going, yes, you were, Burke. I'd have married you in a heartbeat. Love that.
But it takes strength to say that, though, because it'd be easy to say, I'm so sorry for what I've done, or I grieve for this pain that I've inadvertently caused. And he goes, no, listen, the circumstances were difficult and dodgy and miscommunicative. At the same time, I think from one standpoint, things did pan out pretty well for us.
Yeah, the fact that I was around. Yeah. Had she married you, it would have gone one way. She married me because we thought you were dead. I was the better man. She's had an easier life of it because of it. Yeah. Yeah. And we do he has had some time to come to grips with that, because we see when Fitz is skilling to Nettle, and Swift has run away the second time. Yeah. And Fitz thinks he's sent Swift home, not realizing that he's now going to be on the vessel with them. He thinks he's sent Swift home, and he's saying to Nettle, don't panic, Swift's on his way home. And she's like, I can't just tell my dad I had a dream that he's going to be home and make them stop worrying. And Fitz lets the cat out of the bag and says, okay, tell him you had a dream about a wolf with a porcupine quill, and I will look after your son as you looked after Chivalries. And Nettle comes back to him the following night going, what did those words mean?
He has a smile on his face. He's staring at a wall.
No, he's in horror. What have we done, woman? As he then staggers away after collapsing. Like, he's properly in shock as he realizes, holy crap, he's alive and I married Molly.
But there's a happiness to it as well, I remember, on the page. He's elated.
Become a happiness. Yes. But his first reaction is horror. Yeah. Because rather than happiness that Fitz is alive, it's horror that I've married Fitz's woman. Jesus. Yeah. Because the first words he utters are to Molly, you don't know what we've done.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so Nettle's response is, whatever you said, whatever those words meant So my dad really freaked him out.
Mhm.
You need to explain.
Yeah.
Which, of course, Fitz avoids because that's what he does. So Burke's had however many weeks to come to terms with this. And while he's travelled to the island to come to the rescue. So by the time he arrives at the island, he's accepted that, okay, yeah, we maybe shouldn't have got married. If we'd known you were alive, we wouldn't have. But we did. And mine was pretty good to her.
Yeah.
We had a good life.
Yep.
You know,
and you know what? A life that was 10 times as long together than Molly and Fitz were ever together.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, it was that passion of being young and that moment in time. Yeah. But then when Fitz gets his memory back, he gets all of that depth of passion and all of that depth of driving motivation back as a man. And he's like, no, I still love this woman.
Yeah.
And it is love, and it always was love. But he has the urgency of youth as part of it now as well. So he's not going to take no for an answer. And if it means he's got to write her a letter every week for the next year, he's gonna. Yeah. Okay. You get points for that, Fitz.
But I can understand, though, why people would be upset with that, because there's a persistence that could be also interpreted as, what's the word? Pushiness.
Stalking?
Yeah, stalking.
Stalking.
You could definitely retell that last 100 pages in a different light, the same events in a different light. You know, the children, why does this man keep writing letters to my mother when she wants nothing to do with him? So I could, for me, I find myself happy, like just selfishly happy that this man has a nice ending, because we've been through so much with him and he's been through so much.
Very much so.
A different way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm happy that that's where it did end. I'm unhappy that there wasn't a layer of difficulty that I just think there would have been. Even though Barak is no longer as part of the picture, I just feel there would have been more awkwardness, more resistance from the boys, perhaps more adamant refusal from her. I don't know, but I just feel that it would have been more than just, okay, I'm just going to religiously write you letters until you give in. It felt too easy. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm glad we got there. That's great. Lovely. Wonderful.
It
just feels like Barak erasure. I love Barak too much.
I guess if I were to predict that ending, knowing what I know of Hobb, I would have predicted Hobb to have done something like, okay, one of the boys just holds out. And that's how the novel ends. You know, little Gary, I forget the names of the actual kids. You'll know them. Little Gary, he hasn't come round. He's saying he's still not talking to me. He lives on the estate, and we're hoping he'll come around one day. Something like that feels a bit more true to Hobb than what we got. One thing as well, I don't know if you've noticed, my copy is signed by my daughter. So there's that too.
That's okay.
Well, I'm sure read these in about 20 years' time. Or 15
well, she has
years'
to
time.
now.
Yeah.
She's, you know, you have to tell her, no, you told me you wanted to read this one. That's why you signed it.
Yeah. What I do is my parents, whenever they come to visit me, I have a book order. I'll have about 5 or 6 books. And so the last time they came to visit me, and we actually met in Egypt. So I said, listen, you're going to come meet me in Egypt. I know your packing space is minimal. Bring this trilogy. So I guess with Rain Wilds, I think what I'll do is I'll order the box set of Rain Wilds to come when I'm back in Scotland over summer. I think I've told you I'm moving again, different country. So I'll be back in Scotland for about 2 weeks. And during that time, I think I'll pick up a set of Rain Wilds and bring that with me.
Do leave them for a little while. One of the reasons I think that people do struggle with the Rain Wilds is they come after Tawny Man. You've read A Song of Ice and Fire?
Yes.
Okay, so you know how Storm of Swords is like, okay, all of those first story arcs come to conclusions and it's all very satisfying. Like it's a really great read. And then you read Feast for Crows and you're like, what?
Nothing's happening.
Yeah. Nothing's happening because we're rebuilding, we're restarting a new arc. That's very much what the Rain Wilds are doing. In much the same way, there's a big gap after Tawny Man was released. The story was finished.
Yep.
Those arcs are finished.
Yep.
And then many years later, characters have revisited Hobb and gone, our story isn't finished. I
have two.
There's more. So take a break and come back to it when you've got zero expectations and you're ready to come into it as a new and because it's a new starting point, it's new characters, and that then merges with the existing story when we come back to Fitz in the Fall.
So maybe 6 months, something like that. I'll buy the
Yeah.
box set and I'll keep it on the shelf excitedly.
Yeah.
I think I'm so like Rain Wilds for me. I don't want to call it homework, but I'm anticipating more Fitz in the Fall. I'm not going to skip Rain Wilds. Of course, I wouldn't do that. I do things in order. But for me currently, I've heard people say that and we've already had this discussion. With them, actually, that Rain Wilds, you guys enjoy it, but for most people, it seems to be the weakest entry. I'm going to read it. I hope I love it, but I'm so curious about Fitz in the Fall because everything's wrapped up. Where do you go? And I'm also curious to what extent previous series will reflect on that final trilogy. And you don't need to answer that.
You can't read the final trilogy without having read at least the first 3.
And you know what? But I don't know what I want. Do I want all of the previous entries to come together into some grand final trilogy? That doesn't seem like what Hobb is doing.
But it kind of is what's happening, because the way I look at it is Liveships and Rain Wilds are merging lanes on the highway that are Fitz's story. And it's Fitz's story. So everything he's gone through comes into this main storyline. And as it comes past Liveships, it's kind of picked up threads from that one. And it's going to pick up threads from Rain Wilds and continue moving forward. And one of the lovely things, and I mentioned this to, who was I talking to just the other day? I'm trying to think. It'll come to me. That her stories don't end. They come to a conclusion, but it's not finished. Much like life. If you say, okay, tell me the story of your life, you're not going to get to today and go full stop, that end, and nothing else is ever going to happen to me. Yeah. Because tomorrow something will happen and you keep going.
Yes. And there's a realization that we all have. This is going to be a bit of a horrible thing to kind of wind up with. But there's also this realization that everyone has at some point where you realize that the final day of your life is almost definitely not going to have a bow on it. You're not going to have a day where
halfway through a book
and all your narrative threads have closed off and you've been, and then you can go like Night Ties gets a little bit.
Exactly.
But when you move on, it's not going to work.
I can guarantee I'll be halfway through a book. I can guarantee I'll be halfway through a TV show.
What my last book is going to be. Yeah, I think about that all the time. I shouldn't do. It's a bit morbid. One book will be my last.
There'll be people I've told I'm going to ring back.
Yeah.
I'm never going to ring them back.
Yeah.
That's just how life goes. And I don't think that's a spoiler at all to say that's the feeling that you get as the series keeps going, is that the world keeps going.
Yep.
The characters that we've met, some of them, their lifespans aren't going to match the span of the books, and some of them exceed it.
Yes.
Because that's how life goes. And it finishes the story being told, but the people in the story continue. So if Robin Hobb has had someone come knocking on her head going, hey, you've told the beginning of my story, but I have more to say. Yay!
And that might be Yeah, I can't wait. Do you know what? I hope I catch up before, if that new book or new series, whatever it is, gets formally properly announced with a title and page count. I hope I catch up before then. It'd be quite nice to have a Robin Hobb book that I can anticipate. But we'll see.
I think it. I think if she has a story to tell, she's not somebody who is. That's not right. That's not true. She can do a short story. She usually writes short stories under Megan Lindholm, though. Robin Hobb is her expansive storytelling vibe. So I think it's unlikely it'll be a small story. Mm-hmm. So, we can hope.
Yeah. Authors often find out halfway through. Again, going back to Stephen Erickson, he was writing a trilogy that has now become a quartet. So things expand and things contract as well. Sometimes it's nice when a trilogy becomes just 2 books. The Hobbit movies should have been 1 book, 1 movie.
The Hobbit movies.
We will get into a conversation for another day. But I will read Rain Wilds. How's that for a tongue twister? And when I do, we'll do another one of these.
Oh yes, absolutely. Because, and this is something I wanted to mention, is because of the way the books used to be marketed in terms of they all had different covers, and so there wasn't anything really to suggest it was one big series. There's a surprising number of people who come into the story with Rainwilds, not knowing that there are 9 books beforehand.
Does that work?
Most of those people that I've spoken to have read Rainwilds, loved Rainwilds, and then gone, I have to read these other 9 books before I can now move forward. And of those people, they're the people who still rate Rainwilds as their favorite.
Okay.
If that's their entry point, it stays high. It's only for the people who read the first 9 and then read Rainwilds that it's a weaker entry, which is how I know it's not the writing that's less. It's the expectation coming off Tawny Man. And so
I'll leave it. I'll see how I feel in summer. The urge might strike me, but I won't push it if it's not there.
Oh no, and you might actually find that theme work in Rainwilds useful in terms of teaching that age group. A lot of the characters are in that age group. The first 2 books, there's 4 books in Rainwilds, and it was written as 2 books, and both of those books were split by the publisher. So
it's really a duology secretly.
It's really a duology, and you kind of need to know that going in, because it means that the first book doesn't end satisfactorily, and the second book feels like just more of the first book. Because
most people
it's one
online have been critical of the second book. That's what I've seen. I just look at the Goodreads star rate.
It's just the same as the first book. What the heck?
Okay.
That's why it's one book. And when you read it with that in mind, it's good to know. And the same thing with the second one. But it has young protagonists, and a lot of the theme work is really relevant to young people. It's a lot about consent. It's a lot about social dynamics. It's a lot about othering and bullying and peer pressure, and a lot of those very relevant life themes that you need to wrap your head around. And I personally love it for that. There's a lot of body agency. There's a lot of consent. There's a lot of, if you're new at the world stuff, these are things perhaps you need to think about.
Yeah. But I guess the criticism by the people who don't like it, I guess, would be that they would interpret it as almost like teenagey young adult drama.
It came out at the height of YA. Hunger Games had just become the juggernaut that it was. The publishers targeted this at YA because the protagonists were young. And it's why they split the first book, because it was such a big book that we can't ask YA audiences to buy this chonker of a book. We'll make them smaller.
Yeah.
And so that was the intent, but Robin Hobb is not a YA author, so that didn't work. So,
and there's often that mistake that young children equals young adult, which drives me mental, because we don't. It
wasn't written that way.
Protagonist equals age of audience, which is absurd.
I mean, it's because I don't have a problem with any kid reading whatever they get their hands on. If they don't get it, they don't get it. They're not ready for it yet.
Yeah.
And it's not a YA feeling story, even though a lot of the themes feel very YA, because they're relationship based, and they're character based, and they're moving forward in your life and doing new thing based. It's relevant to grown-ups. It doesn't matter that your protagonists in the first book, 2 books, are young.
Yes.
The second half of the series, we get some characters from Liveship show up. The themes change slightly in terms of the story. Now we've achieved what we would set it out to do in the first half. Now we're doing the moving forward bit, now that we've achieved the first half. And it shifts a bit. And so a lot of readers much prefer the second half of the series.
That's what I've noticed.
Yeah. And really the only difference is that you get some people from Liveships get added.
I'm looking forward to it.
Older.
Yeah. But, listen, what we'll do is in a chat, I will tell you honestly, that's my pledge to you. I won't dress it up. If I don't think it's for me, then we'll have a good discussion either way. Because I'm looking forward to it, because It's more Hobb.
I
As
wasn't
we said,
a big fan.
that Hobb book is still a good book.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Rain Wilds for the longest time. And it wasn't until I watched AP Canavan on A Critical Dragon.
He's
and I was like,
brilliant.
I've bounced off this series so hard over the years, and I just don't include it in my rereads anymore. And he was talking about something else, and I thought, oh, I need to take that advice, which was just let it be what it is. Stop reading against the text.
Yeah.
And I started to do that, and it changed completely the experience I was having with Rain Wilds. Just let it be what it is.
AP Canavan is just the absolute representation of you do not need a million fancy editing skills. If you're clever and what you're saying is interesting, that'll grab people. And I adore him for that. I think he's a wonderful channel. Like years before I ever made my channel, I was watching
he's
him.
wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, I credit him with my ability to read anything new, because for years I just wasn't able to.
Have you told him that?
Yeah, I have a few times. He's a remarkable man, and I will forever be grateful, because it was the return of a gift to be able to read new books again. So anybody who isn't subscribed to AP Canavan, I will add his channel to the description below, because if you're not subscribed to AP, you are missing out on some of the most incredible insights to literature and fantasy and editing and writing that you could possibly imagine. And with that,
we like an Irish accent as well.
Yes. I mean, he's the developmental editor for Ericsson and for several other people. But it means that he has some remarkable insights into Malazan particularly. But,
Can I ask you before we go? I've got one question for you. You asked me for my ranking of the 3 that I've read. What is your ranking of the 5, without spoiling anything? I'd love to hear that before I nip off.
Of the 3 or of the 5?
Of the 5.
Of the 5?
Yeah.
Mine goes Tawny Man
Top.
as my favorite. Yep. Then it would have to be I'm going to put Liveships and Fitz in the Fall second equal.
You're cheating.
I have to, because some days which one? It depends on which theme I want to think about. And then Farseer and Rain Wilds sit pretty much head to head. Again, they're equally as strong in what they're doing and the theme work and the characters and all of the things. It becomes very difficult to rank them because I have found so many intertwined theme threads and interwoven storylines and usages of things that they become really difficult for me to completely separate them out and judge them individually. So it's tough.
Interesting. I love how the books are discrete units, and at the same time they do all kind of together. Fabulous. Thank you for having me on. I'm sorry that I have to run. It's been 2.5 hours, hasn't it? But got to get up for work. But listen, I was going to say this to you off, but I'll just say it to you on. This has been one of my favorite discussions since I started my channel. It's been really fun.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, really. And I've had some good conversations. So, it's good to dig in properly to Hobb, I would say.
I have gained so much value from talking to other people, even with the number of times I've read them, because everybody brings something that nobody else has brought. And it's always fascinating to find what resonates with people and things that they don't think are important enough to talk about, So I find it fascinating. So thank you so much for coming. And
you're welcome.
We will definitely talk again, because you're officially a friend of the channel now, because you've been.
Nice.
So the invitation is always open. We share multiple things that we both enjoy. We will talk again.
Cool.
So for anybody in the chat, thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this on replay later, welcome. Thank you. Do feel free to sub to David's channel. Very lovely. 4 corners of the page. I was briefly on there a couple of weeks ago talking Dungeon Crawler Carl, because I totally love that series too. David's channel is linked below, and I think that's all I need to say.
Thank you.
With that, we shall love you and leave you. Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.